For this section, I said I'd give you a reason why the Big Bang model is anti-scientific. I'm actually not going to give you one reason. I'm going to give you 5 reasons why the Big Bang is explicitly contrary to the most fundamental principles of science. Here they are. The model violates the laws of physics. The model denies the laws of physics. The model is self-contradictory. The model has absurd implications. The model refutes itself. Let's talk about these in order. Reason number 1. The Big Bang model violates the laws of physics. We've already seen that the Big Bang model violates some of the most important principles of physics, like the conservation of mass and energy. Any model which claims to be scientific, while violating the most fundamental laws in science, isn't actually scientific. That's pretty straightforward. Reason number 2 is a bit more subtle. The Big Bang contradicts the laws of physics in an even deeper way than just violating them. Here's a question. What's the most basic, the most fundamental thing you need in order to do physics? You might think the answer is laboratory equipment, or maybe the scientific method. Or something even more basic would be our senses, so we can make observations of the world around us. But there's something more basic even than all of these. The most basic thing you need in order to do physics is a universe to which physics can be applied. And the Big Bang model can't supply this. Earlier we discussed how the Big Bang model says that time didn't exist before the Big Bang occurred. The Big Bang is supposedly the very first event in history. That's why cosmologists frequently make comments like this one. If space spontaneously popped into existence, so did time. Namely, time and space are both classical concepts that may have a limited domain of validity. And so, the question what was before the Big Bang may simply be a bad question, because there was no before. Time didn't exist. Think about what this means. It means that the Big Bang had no cause, because a cause has to come before its effect. And before the Big Bang, there was no time in which a cause could have occurred. As one astronomer explained, maybe there was no ultimate cause for the universe. It just happened. And another cosmologist famously said, the universe is simply one of those things that happens from time to time. Well, if the universe just happened, if there was no reason for it to create itself, if the universe's self-creation was a random event, then the universe was founded in randomness. It would inherently be a random thing. But science requires that the universe operate consistently and non-randomly. Science requires that the universe operate according to strict laws of physics, so that we can perform experiments to discover those laws and understand how the universe works. Science requires the universe to operate according to consistent patterns of behavior, so we can test and explore and eventually discover those patterns. But according to secular cosmologists, the universe was founded in randomness. So, do these cosmologists have the right then to expect the universe to operate according to strict laws of physics afterwards? No, they don't. It would seem instead that a universe which began in randomness would stay random. Now, scientists who approach science biblically don't have this problem. The Bible says that our Creator is a God of order. He upholds the universe by the word of His power. Unless He intervenes in the form of a miracle, the creation works according to consistent laws. Not only that, He has promised that the creation will continue to operate according to regular and predictable patterns. So scientists who believe in the Bible can trust that there are laws of physics, and that science is therefore possible. But secular cosmologists deny that there is a creator who made an orderly universe. They insist that everything came from randomness, for no reason whatsoever. But if everything is random, which is what the Big Bang model implies, then science becomes impossible. Therefore, secular cosmologists have no reason to expect science to work. Am I saying that someone who isn't a Christian can't do science? No, I'm not. In fact, there are many good scientists who are secular and don't believe in a creator. But they aren't doing science while acting consistently with their secular beliefs, because that would be impossible. Instead, they're basically borrowing from the Christian worldview and assuming that the universe is orderly despite the implications of the Big Bang model. As one physicist has pointed out, people take it for granted that the physical world is both ordered and intelligible. The underlying order in nature, the laws of physics, are simply accepted as given, as brute facts. Nobody asks where they come from. At least they don't in polite company. However, even the most atheistic scientist accepts as an act of faith the existence of a law-like order in nature that is at least in part comprehensible to us. So science can proceed only if the scientist adopts an essentially theological worldview. Reason 3. The Big Bang model is self-contradictory. Think about the multiverse idea for a moment. Remember, it's part of the Big Bang model, and it's there, and we need to deal with it. But even secular cosmologists admit that the subject of parallel universes is highly speculative. No experiment or observation has established that any version of the idea is realized in nature. The multiverse says there's an infinite number of universes outside of our own. By definition, all the other universes can't be perceived. They're unobservable. What word do we use to describe things that are outside of our observable universe? If they're outside of the universe we can see, then they're outside of the natural world, which means they're supernatural. That's what the word means, right? Outside of nature, beyond nature. But earlier we saw that the Bible was rejected as a possible explanation for the universe because it offers a supernatural explanation. Here we see that the Big Bang model is doing the same thing. In fact, do you remember that definition of science we saw at the beginning of this video? Modern science does not deal with supernatural explanations because they are not scientifically testable. In other words, there's no way to gather evidence that would help us determine whether or not the explanations are accurate. Well, that description perfectly matches the multiverse. By definition, all the other universes can't be detected. And since the Big Bang model requires a multiverse, this means that the Big Bang model ultimately isn't scientific. Even some secular thinkers agree with this. These multiverse theories all share the same fundamental defect. They can be neither confirmed nor falsified. Hence, they don't deserve to be called scientific. Multiverse theories aren't theories. They're science fictions, theologies, works of the imagination unconstrained by evidence. Another said, "My own moral concerns about the multiverse have more to do with worry that pseudoscience is being heavily promoted to the public. If a wrong idea is promoted for enough years, it gets into the textbooks and becomes part of the conventional wisdom about how the world works. This process is now well underway with multiverse pseudoscience." After the initial period of creation, the biblical account of origins is consistent with both the laws of science and the practice of science, but the Big Bang model is not. Instead, the Big Bang model denies supernatural explanations, while at the same time, it requires supernatural explanations. Its claims to be science are self-contradictory. Reason 4. The Big Bang model has absurd implications. In Matthew 7:20, Jesus said, "By their fruits you shall know them." If the Big Bang were a good model, then its fruits would be good science. But if it's not a good model, then its fruits will be wrong, or perhaps even absurd. So let's examine the fruits of the Big Bang theory and of secular cosmology overall. And for each item we'll ask, is this actually good science? Or is it just science fiction? We'll start with the fine-tuning of the universe. We saw earlier that cosmologists are wrestling with this and trying to deny the creator that this fine-tuning implies. Some have said that the universe is fine-tuned because we cause it to be that way, just by looking at it. As an article in New Scientist explained, maybe we should approach cosmic fine-tuning not as a problem, but as a clue. Perhaps it is evidence that we somehow endow the universe with certain features by the mere act of observation. It's an idea that Stephen Hawking has been thinking about too. Hawking advocates what he calls top-down cosmology, in which observers are creating the universe and its entire history right now. If we in some sense create the universe, it's not surprising that the universe is well suited to us. In other words, the universe doesn't really exist on its own. We create it just by looking at it, so of course it would be fine-tuned for us, because we're the ones creating it. That's an amazing story. But is it science? Or just science fiction? Meanwhile, some other cosmologists don't like the idea that the universe had a beginning, because even though the Big Bang model isn't biblical, the idea that the cosmos had a beginning still sounds too much like the book of Genesis. So they're trying to get rid of it by saying that our universe doesn't really have only 3 spatial dimensions. It's actually a multidimensional membrane universe that periodically collides with other multidimensional membrane universes, and each collision creates a new Big Bang in a regular cycle that goes on forever. Of course, none of these other membrane universes are observable to us. Is this science? Or just science fiction? Other cosmologists are trying to get rid of a beginning by getting rid of time itself. For example, one wrote, "Our universe may be the offspring of some other universe. Baby universes fluctuate into existence in both directions of time, eventually emptying out and giving birth to babies of their own. On ultra-large scales, such a multiverse would look statistically symmetric with respect to time. Both the past and the future would feature new universes fluctuating into life and proliferating without bound. Each of them would experience an arrow of time, but half would have an arrow that was reversed with respect to that in the others. In other words, there's an infinitely large multiverse, filled with an infinite number of big bangs, producing an infinite number of baby universes, none of which we can see. And oh, by the way, in half of those universes, time must flow backwards. Is this science? Or science fiction? And while we're talking about the multiverse, we saw earlier that Big Bang believers try to explain away many of their problems with this idea. But a multiverse has implications that are just silly. For example, in a multiverse, there's an infinite number of planets out there with alien life, including an infinite number of planets full of dinosaurs which didn't go extinct like they did on Earth, but continued to evolve instead. Well, what would that imply? One secular scientist, who wasn't writing about the multiverse specifically, still touched on this idea when he warned, "Such life forms could well be advanced versions of dinosaurs. We would be better off not meeting them." Yes, we would be better off not meeting them, because there's nothing worse than meeting up with a dinosaur that has better weapons. And if the multiverse is real, then there are an infinite number of universes out there where humans are fighting advanced dinosaurs, right at this very moment. But is this science?
Look out! There comes another one! I got him!
Or just science fiction? Also, if the multiverse is real, there are an infinite number of planets with intelligent aliens on them. With an infinite number of alien species out there, some cosmologists propose that some of these aliens will have technology that's advanced enough to make new universes, including ours. It is proposed that our universe was created by life of superior intelligence existing in another physical universe. Intelligent beings might possess not only the knowledge to design, but also the technology to build universes. This explains why the constants of physics have their observed finely tuned values. So that's why our universe looks so well designed, because aliens did it. Science? Or science fiction? Other cosmologists point out that in a multiverse, it's possible that aliens didn't actually build our universe, because our universe isn't actually real. These cosmologists say that our universe is only a simulation that aliens are running on their computers. It is a perfectly acceptable supposition that the world as we know it is a vast computer program, run on machines built by an intelligence we know nothing about. If you accept the multiverse idea, it is almost inevitable that there are computer-based universes out there. Somewhere among the universes there would, in all probability, be universes where civilizations had developed far enough to produce a Matrix-style universe. Chances are, we do live in a computer simulation of a universe. So if you think our universe is real, you're wrong. It's actually just a video game being played by some alien somewhere. Do you think this sounds silly? Well, you shouldn't laugh, because this is a serious matter.
This is a serious matter.
Some cosmologists are working on ways to figure out if this is true. And this is important work. This research here was funded by the United States government, via the Institute for Nuclear Theory, the National Science Foundation, and the U.S. Department of Energy. These are your tax dollars at work. But is it science? Or science fiction? But wait, it gets even better. If aliens can run computer simulations of universes, then they can also run computer simulations of universes that contain aliens that are running computer simulations of universes. So maybe our universe isn't even an actual computer simulation. Maybe the alien computer that's simulating our universe is itself part of a computer simulation, as this author said. There could even be multiple levels of simulation. The computer our universe runs on could be itself a simulation on another computer. And you could extend this on and on. Maybe the computer that's simulating the simulation is itself a simulation running on a computer that is itself a simulation running on a computer that is itself, well, you get the idea. Do I even need to ask if this is science? Now, not every cosmologist advocates things like our universe being a computer simulation being run by aliens. But the multiverse is completely consistent with this nonsense. And any idea that is consistent with nonsense is itself nonsense. If you accept the multiverse, this is where you wind up, in complete absurdity. Why then do cosmologists, intelligent men and women who claim to be doing good science, insist that such a ridiculous anti-scientific idea is true? Because, as one cosmologist warned, if there is only one universe, you might have to have a fine-tuner. If you don't want God, you'd better have a multiverse. As the Bible says, the fool says in his heart that there is no God. Now don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that atheistic scientists are stupid. On the contrary, most are very intelligent people. But when you deny the truth, you must believe a lie. When you deny God, you must end up in folly, which is exactly where the atheists are today. By this point, you might think that the Big Bang model couldn't get any sillier than this, but believe it or not, it can. Now it's time to reveal the crowning absurdity of the Big Bang model. Reason 5 might be the ultimate disproof of the Big Bang theory. We've seen that the Big Bang theory is contradicted by the evidence in numerous ways. But just for a moment, let's set all those issues aside. Even though we know that the universe couldn't have come from nothing, and that the Big Bang model violates fundamental physics, and that it requires an extreme amount of fine-tuning, and that it has absurd consequences and so on, let's forget about all that for just a moment. Let's pretend to be secular cosmologists who believe that somehow, despite all the reasons that it couldn't have happened, something still popped into existence anyway. It turns out that even if you believe that, the Big Bang model still can't explain our universe. The Big Bang would still be such an unlikely event that other things, which are also very unlikely, are still much more likely to have happened than the Big Bang, and some of these are absurd. You see, even if a cosmic fluctuation had created our universe, which again it didn't, but we're ignoring this for the moment, the Big Bang model says that mathematically, the early universe would have been in an extremely improbable state, and so, such a fluctuation would also be extremely improbable. It turns out that mathematically, it would be a lot simpler if instead of our entire universe popping into existence, if the cosmic fluctuation only had to make our galaxy. Makes sense, right? In fact, it would be even simpler if the fluctuation didn't have to make our entire galaxy, but only our solar system. And it would be even simpler still if the fluctuation didn't have to make our entire solar system, but only the Earth. And it would be simplest of all if the fluctuation didn't have to make the entire Earth, but it only had to make one small thing, you. Now you might be thinking, wait a minute. Yes, a tiny fluctuation might be mathematically simpler, but if we're thinking like secular cosmologists, we still need the fluctuation to explain everything else too, because the Earth exists, and our solar system exists, and the Milky Way galaxy exists, and so do all the other galaxies. But how do you know everything else exists? You think you perceive all these things with your senses. But what if they're all illusions? What if the universe isn't real? What if it turns out that the fluctuation didn't actually make the entire universe? What if it only made your brain, which popped into existence with false memories and false perceptions of a universe around itself? A brain that's just floating in the void, thinking there's a universe, but there isn't because it's all an illusion. Now you might be thinking that this is one of the silliest ideas you've ever heard, and I would agree with you. But remember, we're thinking like secular cosmologists for a moment. Secular cosmologists have to believe that cosmic fluctuations can make things pop into existence. But according to the mathematics of their models, it's infinitely more likely for a single brain to pop into existence than for the Big Bang to have caused a baby universe to pop into existence. Here's how an article in the New York Times described this problem. It could be the weirdest and most embarrassing prediction in the history of cosmology, if not science. If true, it would mean that you yourself reading this article are more likely to be some momentary fluctuation in a field of matter and energy out in space than a person with a real past born through billions of years of evolution in an orderly star-spangled cosmos. Your memories and the world you think you see around you are illusions. This bizarre picture is the outcome of a recent series of calculations that take some of the bedrock theories and discoveries of modern cosmology to the limit. The basic problem is that it's hard for nature to make a whole universe. It's much easier to make fragments of one, like planets, yourself may be in a spacesuit, or even, in the most absurd and troubling example, a naked brain floating in space. Nature tends to do what is easiest from the standpoint of energy and probability. And so these fragments, in particular the brains, would appear far more frequently than real full-fledged universes, or than us, or they might be us. Alan Guth, a cosmologist at MIT, who by the way is the inventor of inflation theory and is a rock star among cosmologists, who agrees this overabundance is absurd, pointed out that some calculations result in an infinite number of free-floating brains for every normal brain, making it, quote, infinitely unlikely for us to be normal brains, unquote. Cosmologists call this the Boltzmann brain problem, named after the physicist Ludwig Boltzmann. Basically, according to secular cosmology, it's far more likely for us to be disembodied brains floating in space than for the universe itself to be real. As two cosmologists wrote, "It is very surprising that we find the universe around us in such a low entropy state. In fact, the logical conclusion of this line of reasoning is utterly solipsistic. The most likely fluctuation consistent with everything you know is simply your brain, complete with memories, fluctuating briefly out of chaos and then immediately equilibrating back into chaos again. This is sometimes called the Boltzmann's brain paradox." Now sometimes people get confused about the Boltzmann brain paradox because they think the paradox is about size. They think that according to the Boltzmann brain problem, a brain would be easier to make from a fluctuation because it's smaller than the universe is. Actually, that's not what the paradox is about. In fact, the Big Bang model says that the early universe would have been much tinier than a brain anyway. The paradox comes from mathematical probability. Even if you're a secular cosmologist who believes that a universe can pop into existence from nothing, the Big Bang model is still so mathematically improbable that a brain popping into existence from nothing is far more probable. Notice I'm not talking about this, a brain floating in our universe. But this, there is no universe. The cosmos is empty other than the brains. There are no galaxies, no stars, no planets, no sun, no Earth, just brains. In fact, cosmologists can't even be sure that there's more than one brain. You might be the only one. Maybe everything you think you see in the world around you, everybody else that you think you know, are all illusions. You're not really watching this video because this video doesn't exist. Even though you think you're watching it, the input you're getting from your senses is an illusion. And even though you think you have memories of watching it up until this point, those memories are actually false because your brain just popped into existence a few seconds ago. In fact, your entire life, from growing up as a child until now, didn't happen either because all your memories are false. Your brain just happened to pop into existence with all the molecules arranged in such a way that it included all these false memories built into it. Oh, and by the way, you aren't going to live long because your brain doesn't actually have a body to sustain it. So you'll die soon, and then your brain will dissolve back into the thermodynamic soup that you originally fluctuated from. Again, this might sound ridiculous. Well, that's because it is. But that's what the secular cosmological models say. In fact, cosmologists have had the Boltzmann brain problem in one form or another for a long time, and they have written lots of articles in the scientific literature trying to solve this problem and trying to escape the menace of the Boltzmann brains for the Big Bang model. But despite their efforts, the problem has actually gotten worse instead of better. Cosmologists have realized that eternal inflation, dark energy, and the multiverse all lead directly to Boltzmann brains. As long as any one of these things remains part of the Big Bang model, and they're all essential pieces of it, then the Big Bang model says we're infinitely more likely to be Boltzmann brains than normal people. As these physicists wrote, a typical observer in the multiverse is a Boltzmann brain. In the eternally inflating vacua, observers are infinitely more likely to be Boltzmann brains than honest folk like ourselves. Now let me be clear here. I'm not saying that cosmologists believe that we're Boltzmann brains. They don't because the idea is clearly absurd. But they're being inconsistent because that's what their model says. The whole situation has become so ridiculous that some scientists are complaining about it. As one wrote, modern cosmologists have a favorite default theory of the universe, labeled lambda CDM, where lambda stands for the cosmological constant, which refers to dark energy, and CDM for cold dark matter. In other words, lambda CDM is just a complicated nickname for today's version of the Big Bang model. Now back to the quote. What we're pointing out is that lambda CDM, the current leading candidate for an accurate description of the cosmos, can't be right all by itself. It has a Boltzmann brain problem and is therefore cognitively unstable and unacceptable as a physical theory. So what does all this mean? The Big Bang Theory, when taken to its logical conclusion, means we're probably not real people. We're probably just Boltzmann brains. Remember, it's infinitely unlikely for us to be normal brains. This means that the universe we see is an illusion. It doesn't really exist. And since a universe which doesn't exist never had a beginning, this means there was no Big Bang. In other words, the Big Bang model ultimately says that the Big Bang is infinitely unlikely to have happened. And that means that the Big Bang model has self-destructed because it's self-refuting. The Big Bang model disproves itself. So what can we learn from everything we've seen in this video? Several things. First of all, I hope it's clear that the debate over creation versus the Big Bang is not a conflict between religion and science. Many secular scientists try to portray it that way, but they're deceiving themselves. Is the biblical account of creation supernatural? Yes, of course, but so is the Big Bang model. Both accounts are supernatural. Both views are, in effect, based on miracles. So this conflict is not a clash of science versus religion. It's a clash of two faith-based worldviews, two different ways of looking at the universe, both of which have faith in things that are beyond empirical verification. The difference is that the creation worldview is far superior to the Big Bang worldview. The universe had a beginning, and the creation worldview explains how it began. The universe looks exceptionally fine-tuned, and the creation worldview explains who the fine-tuner is. And most importantly, the creation worldview is based on the Bible, which not only has its own authority as the Word of God, it's also well supported and well documented from history. On the other hand, consider all the problems within the Big Bang model. The model has accumulated a towering stack of bandages and rescuing devices, including inflation, dark energy, the multiverse, and much more. Even many secular scientists recognize that it's an ugly mishmash held together by band-aids, just a folktale constantly re-edited to fit inconvenient new observations. The Big Bang model is supposed to be based on the evidence, but instead it requires a big stack of excuses to explain away the evidence. It claims to be scientific, but instead it contradicts the foundations of science. It denies the supernatural, but instead it requires supernatural explanations. The Big Bang is not only bad science, it's ultimately based on hypocrisy. Despite all this, the Big Bang model is still promoted and pushed in Western culture as being the truth. Among atheists, it's overwhelmingly the most popular explanation for why the universe exists. And since atheists are getting more and more vocal today, let's end this video with a brief discussion of atheism and the universe. We've already seen that atheists who deny the Creator and trust in the Big Bang model instead can't explain why the universe exists. Nor can they do good science, at least not while thinking and acting like atheists. Nor can they ultimately even provide any reason for wanting to do science in the first place. It's ironic that many atheists claim that they can find joy in discovering more about the cosmos. As Bill Nye the Science Guy has said, there's a question that troubles us all from the time we are first able to think, and that is, where did we come from? We are driven to pursue that, to find out where we came from. The joy of discovery, that's what drives us. To us, this is wonderful and charming and compelling. This is what makes us get up and go to work every day. Many atheists have feelings about this that are clearly quite religious. For example, Carl Sagan used to say things like this: "Our feeblest contemplations of the cosmos stir us. There is a tingling in the spine, a catch in the voice, a faint sensation, as if a distant memory, of falling from a great height. We know we are approaching the greatest of mysteries." But what joy of discovery can an atheist really have? According to atheism, there's no reason for the cosmos to exist. It's all a meaningless accident. There's no real interest to be found in the things it contains. Everything within it is ultimately just rearrangements of the original hydrogen and helium gas. To an atheist, a galaxy or a nebula ultimately isn't much different than the air inside of this jar. And atheists can't even protest that these objects are beautiful, because according to them, beauty is meaningless too. According to evolution, our sense of beauty is just a biological impulse, something to attract animals to each other, to drive them to breed. And what's the point of discovering anything about the universe anyway? For an atheist, the ultimate fate of the universe is death and eternal darkness. If there is no God, then in the future, after enough time has passed, every star will eventually burn out. Every source of heat will cool off and dissipate. Everything that's alive will die. The universe will be dark, cold, empty, and completely sterile. If there is no God, then ultimately nothing matters. If the universe formed from a random Big Bang, and then humanity evolved by natural processes, then we're just a cosmic accident. There's no reason for us to be here, and so there's no purpose in our existence. Pain, death, and suffering are our fate, and there's no meaning to any of it. As atheist Richard Dawkins has said, in a universe of blind physical forces and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt, other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason in it, nor any justice. The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect. If there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. And as one evolutionist wrote, the universe is as deaf to our joyful dancing as to our lamentations, and nobody out there in the immeasurable expanses of the cosmos will bemoan the end of humanity. To an atheist, the vastness of the universe shows that we humans are utterly insignificant. As Carl Sagan wrote, our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. And as atheist cosmologist Lawrence Krauss wrote, we're just a bit of pollution. If you got rid of us, then the universe would be largely the same. We're completely irrelevant. If atheism is true, then our lives are meaningless and pointless. If there is no God, then the laws of physics say that the universe will eventually become completely sterile. Just as a hot cup of coffee cools off until it reaches room temperature, so every source of usable energy in the universe is dissipating, and will continue to do so until there's no energy available anywhere to sustain life. Not only is humanity insignificant and irrelevant, our species will eventually be extinct anyway, along with all other life on planet Earth or anywhere else. Even if there's alien life out there somewhere, it will die too. As the universe slowly cools into a permanent total freeze, the entire universe will be completely sterile, completely lifeless, forever. There will be nobody to remember anything that anybody ever did. As one author wrote, in a universe with this ultimate fate, human existence itself is nothing but a meaningless accident, and humans are isolated in an indifferent and incomprehensible universe. There is no room for anything that has value for humanity, no room for consciousness, joy, sadness, or hope. And as atheist Bertrand Russell realized, even more purposeless, more void of meaning, is the world which science presents for our belief. That man is the product of causes which had no prevision of the end they were achieving. That his origin, his growth, his hopes and fears, his loves and his beliefs are but the outcome of accidental collocations of atoms. That no fire, no heroism, no intensity of thought and feeling can preserve an individual life beyond the grave. That all the labors of the ages, all the devotion, all the inspiration, all the noonday brightness of human genius are destined to extinction in the vast death of the solar system, and that the whole temple of man's achievement must inevitably be buried beneath the debris of a universe in ruins. Only within the scaffolding of these truths, only on the firm foundation of unyielding despair, can the soul's habitation henceforth be safely built. And as physicist and atheist Steven Weinberg has said, the more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems pointless. For the atheist, there was no meaning or purpose for the universe at the beginning, and there will be none at the end. So when you hear atheists talk about the universe with words like beautiful, amazing, awe-inspiring, remember that they're using words that are inconsistent with their atheism. To be consistent with their atheism, they should be describing the universe and our role within it with words like futile, purposeless, meaningless, hopeless. Now contrast this to the joy of the Christian who looks at the cosmos. Christians can have the joy of discovery and have it be meaningful, because the heavens declare the glory of God, and it is exhilarating to discover more of the cosmos and to see more of the stunning beauty of what the Lord has made rejoicing in His creativity. Christians can expect the universe to be orderly and accessible to science, because our Creator made the heavens and earth to operate according to ordinances which are our joy and privilege to discover. Christians can affirm that human life has meaning, and every human life is valuable, because every man, woman, and child is made in the image of God. And Christians can understand that even though there is much pain and suffering in the world today, this is not permanent, and it wasn't part of God's original plan. Death, pain, and suffering came into the world as a result of man's sin, and ultimately, they will be removed again at the end of this age. Even the vastness of the universe is not a cause for feelings of insignificance and despair, but a cause for joy. After all, who created all this? It was Jesus. By Him all things were created, in the heavens and on earth. All things were made by Him, and without Him nothing was made that was made. Yet He also humbled Himself and took on human form. He became one of us, dying a horrible death on the cross. He did this because we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. He did this because in our sin and rebellion against an infinitely holy God, we had incurred a debt that we could not pay. He did this because only by taking the punishment for our sins upon Himself, only by serving as a substitute and dying in our place, could we receive redemption and forgiveness for our sins. To accomplish this, Christ submitted Himself to untold pain, humiliation, and suffering for our sake. Why? Because He loves us, and there was no other way to save us. And here's our final thought. How much did the creation cost God? Nothing. For our omnipotent Creator, it was only a trifle. Genesis 1:16 implies that the creation of all the stars in the universe was a mere afterthought. But how much did your salvation cost God? The life of the Son of God, a very high price indeed. And Jesus paid this price willingly, to redeem you and reconcile you to Himself. So rejoice. The size and scale of the universe do not show your insignificance. Instead, the vastness of the cosmos, this awe-inspiring, wondrous universe that made the angels shout for joy at its creation, should remind you of the far bigger love that Christ has for you. May it be that whenever we gaze out into the heavens, so full of wonders, that we are reminded of their Creator. May it be that each time we are reminded to glorify our Creator and to praise His wonderful name. And may it be that each time we are prompted to give thanks for His abundant mercy and grace, and in all ways to faithfully serve Him. Amen.
Hi, Spike Basaris here. If you've seen Volume 2 in this series, you'll know that at the end I said that Volume 3, which you're watching right now, would discuss the question of distant starlight. The basic question is this: if our universe is young, then how can we see starlight that seems like it would have needed millions or even billions of years to get here? It turns out that there are several possible answers to that question, and this is actually a very interesting topic. So a full discussion of it would take some time. But as you might have already noticed, the main feature on this DVD is already almost 2 hours long, so there wasn't enough room to discuss this topic fully. Also, this DVD is mostly about the Big Bang model, and this issue didn't really fit into the overall theme anyway. So, this topic has been deferred to a later DVD that will deal with age issues in the universe, including the distant starlight question. Meanwhile, I've put a short article on this topic on my website with some more information on this issue. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.